Okay, perfect. So welcome everybody, and we're so happy to have you this morning for our presentation on rebuilding enterprise value for small businesses. Before we start, I just want to make a couple comments about the technical side of our presentation today. If you have any issues seeing the presentation on your screen, I did email a PDF of this presentation to the email that you used to register with Eventbrite. So if any of you are calling in on the phone, it looks like I see one person. You can follow along on that PDF as we move through the presentation. We'll also have a Q&A chat session after our presentation this morning. So we will ask that you put your questions into the chat box. If you can't find your chat box, there is a small icon on Teams that looks like a word bubble. And so if you click on that, your chat box should come up to the right side of the Teams application. And I know we do have one person on the phone, so if we do have time at the end, we'll open it up to verbal questions as well. Without further ado, I think we will get started. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kathleen Sly, and I'm from the Small Business Administration, the Minnesota District Office. I just want to say that although we don't endorse any particular business, SBA's participation or support is not an endorsement of any product, service, or entity. We have planned a tremendous series of trainings throughout the summer. This month, well, I guess it is July, so through the end of July and into August, on some outside experts who are coming in and supporting to train on some really pertinent issues, especially in these uncertain times. So I want to welcome Julie Keys. So Julie, she's a national speaker, teacher, and certified exit planner, a lifelong entrepreneur and current faculty member for Hopus Performance Network and Exit Planning Institute. And she brings a set of uncommon skill set and talent to every speaking and consulting engagement. So her mission is really to help clients unpack the mystery of exit planning, really that transition time, which plays into the topic that we're talking about today, explaining the process and a roadmap. So whether that's a transition or re-strategizing, or you're looking at an exit plan for your business, Julie has a tremendous experience in that area. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Julie Keys, and we welcome her expertise as we move through this topic today. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie. And thanks to you and Sarah for bringing me in to do this seminar today. I'm excited to be here. It's a hot topic. And to be honest with you, there's a lot to say about rebuilding enterprise value. So we're not going to be able to cover it all today, but I am confident that at the end of this hour, you will have some action items that you can use and take away and apply right away. So we'll just get started. As Katie said, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my consulting practice about 9 years ago and added on exit planning as part of my consulting practice because there's so much about exit planning that has to do with regular business planning and implementation. So many times business owners come to a point where they're ready to sell, ready to transition out, and they find that their business isn't ready and they're not ready as owners. So today we're going to talk about rebuilding enterprise value because I think that a lot of you have experienced a gap that you maybe didn't have before, or maybe you did have a value gap, but now it's bigger. And you're not alone, okay? So what is a value gap? Let's just talk about that real quick. A value gap is your interpretation or your understanding of what your business is worth, okay, and what you need to sell it for in order to be able to retire and maintain your lifestyle. So if that number is much larger than the number that actually exists today, then you got to kind of close that. And that's what we're up to today. That's what we're talking about. And so you're asking yourself, what's next? You know, how do I move forward? What are the things that I can do to shore up my business and make some decisions and be nimble? And so we'll definitely be talking about that today. Go ahead to the next slide, please. You received in an email some forms, some tools that might be helpful for you. One is called a Transition Planning Checklist, Whether you're planning to exit right now or not, doesn't really matter. Everything that's on that checklist is good, pertinent information for you to be able to think through and assess how strong or weak you are in different areas of your business, primarily focusing on risk mitigation. And that's one thing that I've found over the years in the businesses I've worked with and advised for, that they're not very good at mitigating risk. They're very busy, as I always was when I was running my companies, and I'm still running a company. I just don't have locations and employees like I used to. But you're busy with the day-to-day, right? You've got work to do. You come in early, you leave late, you work weekends, and you're probably doing a lot of that right now. And so thinking about the big picture stuff is just so difficult because you're so mired in what's going on right now and trying to put out fires. And recently, of course, we've all had fires to put out, regardless of whether you're having a good year or not. Some industries are having a good year. I have some clients who are having the best year they've ever had, but they're still afraid. They don't know what's going to happen next. None of us really do. So the more that we can prepare and safeguard what we know and take care of what we have control over, the better our odds are of being able to come out on the other side of this. And truth be told, there will be another side. We're not going to be living through this forever. But I want you to start with assessing yourself on where you start. Like, okay, we've got the event, and where you started with your response and how you're doing now. So because you got the event, and then you've got your response to the event, or your series of responses to the event, and that's going to determine what your outcome is, whether the outcome is positive or negative. So just think for a second, if you were going to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high, where would you rank yourself? Would you give yourself a 5 or a 7 or a 2? That might help you think about what you need to do to adjust and shift your thinking. Because as we all know, our thinking and our attitude determines our behavior. And our behavior is where our decision making and our action items come out of. So just think about that. And then when you do, determine where it is that you really need the most help. I think that where a lot of business owners need help, at least the ones that I work with and have been talking to, they need a lot of help with projection. They need a lot of help with forecasting. They need a lot of help with budgeting. And even if you've got people internally, controllers or CFOs, people that are helping you to think that through, another pair of eyes, especially now, is worth its weight in gold. Someone who's an expert who can check what you've been doing, what your accounting firm, your accounting company, I should say internally, the department, has been doing in terms of budgets, P&L management, fixed and variable expenses. How many of those fixed expenses can you convert to variable? Having someone else look at that and help you and assess that, I think, is worth its weight in gold. And then how can you be proactive and achieve the outcomes that you really want when this is all over? What does that look like? To take some time to really be intentional about what you want the future to look like for yourself. Next slide, please. So we're going to get back to the basics when we talk about what that next, what's next for you? What does that look like? Does it mean that you're going to be shifting your business model? Does that mean that you are going to be expanding and adding on a product or service or a new location? Before you make any of those decisions, you have to start with the basics. And I like to focus on a trajectory, like a hockey stick, okay? If we don't think that way, if we don't plan for that, it will never happen, ever. So even if you only get halfway to where you really wanted to go, you're further along by having a plan and implementing it than if you have none at all. I liken it to getting in the car and driving to Atlanta. Being from Minnesota, as we all are, we have to have a map, right? Even if you've been to Atlanta many times, you don't know what the roads conditions are, what's closed, what kind of detours you might have to take. So you can't get in the car and not have any clue on how you're going to get there. It's the same with running a company. Even if you've got a detour, even if you have to make a change, and granted, we've made a lot of changes, and there's probably more to come, but we still have to have a plan. starting with a focus on your core values. And I'm sure that you have heard conversation about what core values are, why they're important. But I like to start with that because truly, truly, any decision that you're making should be based upon what you value, what's important to you. So starting with that, and if you haven't articulated them, if you haven't written them down, do a little research online. There's all kinds of stuff out there on what is a core value, how do I articulate it. Share it with your team if you haven't already. Make sure that they understand what they are and that they can repeat them back to you. What does this company, ABC company, what do we value? What's important to us? Make sure that everyone can tell you what's important because they're going to be making decisions for you as well on your behalf, right? And they need to know what you value and what's important. Next, you want to revise your SWOT analysis because so many of your goals are going to come out of your SWOT analysis. And in the past, prior to COVID, my strategic planning sessions that I'd have with my clients, we'd go 3 to 5 years out. Generally 3 in terms of like solid revenue goals and solid initiative goals and objectives that we wanted to achieve. 5 years would be more of like a vision, not necessarily goals, because life is changing so fast, technology is changing so fast. So I think 3 years out is plenty in terms of like being super dialed in. Right now, I'm not sure that 3 years out is realistic. Not that you can't have a vision of where you want to go, but to spend most of your time just on the next 90 days. And yes, having an annual goal, having an annual sales goal, having a couple of larger objectives that you can be working on over the next year, and then doing it in 90-day sprints, okay? Because 90 days is much easier for us to focus on and work on and think about as a team. Ask yourself, who's my ideal client or customer? That's all part of the plan, right? Spending a day assessing where you're strong and what you have. Who's my ideal customer or client? How is that going to change? If my business model is changing a little bit, or if I'm going to expand, is my target market going to change? And if that's the case, or if you're expanding that, you need to have that completely articulated, dialed in, written down, making sure that you understand who you're after so that when you're spending time marketing, when you're sending your salespeople out to go find those customers and clients, however they're doing it, whether it's Zoom meetings or phone calls or emails, newsletters, social media. I mean, we will be getting back to face-to-face. Some of that is already there, so don't discount that. But we got to figure out how we get in front of them. What's the best way to do that? And who's missing from our team? If we're going to be expanding, are we going to expand into a new department? Are we going to expand into a new division, or are we going to be a subsidiary, or is it just going to be an add-on to our current product or service offering? Another thing that we might want to consider is pricing. So if you've got pricing per item, perhaps you do packages. If you are a service provider, you can do packages. All right, it doesn't have to be by the hour all the time. In fact, I think that it's more profitable if you package. It's much easier for your client. If you're in the service business, you have clients, right? If you're in the product business, you have customers. That's the difference between the two. And so if you're in the service business and you have clients, your clients need to be able to budget for your services. And right now, that's huge, right? Super important. Everyone needs to shore up cash. And your services are probably essential for them, but you need to convince them that they are, and you need to make it work for their budget. And so if you're charging as a package, it's a lot easier for them to budget versus if you charge by the hour, they have no idea what to expect. And it's much easier for them to turn that off or shut it down altogether or just curtail the service that they have with you. If you're a product and perhaps you have product packages, but you don't want to change your pricing because it's a concept, right? People have this idea, it's a subconscious thing. When we see a price, and there's all kinds of psychology around pricing, right? So maybe you just change the packages, you keep the price as is, but you change the packages and what they get for that price. So those are some things that you probably want to have a good, solid brainstorming session or two with your key people to figure out, okay, what's next and how do we grow? The next thing, and we're spending some time on this because this is huge. All of this is about rebuilding enterprise value. Yes, you have great ideas. Your key people have great ideas. You talk to your peers, other business owners, and they help you. They give you feedback. You should be if you're not already. And your advisors. So dial into your advisors and have them help you figure this out. Feasibility is huge. So you have the idea, but how feasible is it? We got to figure this out logistically. What's feasible for us to do? Do we have the capital? If we don't have the capital, how will we get the capital? Can we use other people's money instead of our own? Do your best to do that. Are there grant funds out there? Are there grant programs that we could take advantage of? Say, for instance, I'll give you an idea for this. Mankato State has a great program that helps manufacturers obtain their ISO certification. And they also can put you in touch with grant programs for that. And I'm sure that our folks here, our helpful folks with the SBA would have resources that they would be able to share with you on how to go about that. But I literally have a manufacturing firm who obtained a grant to be able to implement ISO certification within their manufacturing firm, which will open up doors for them exponentially larger and more vast across the entire world, versus what they've been able to do. And so those are just some of the things, right? Some of the ways that you can be able to just think about what's next for my business. And if you can't get into that creative mindset, go back to when you first started the business and think about how you felt. What were you thinking? What were your dreams? What did it look like? Think about how that felt and see if you can relive that feeling and that excitement. That's really what it's going to take for you to close the gap and to remain a going concern for the future. Got to have some excitement. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about strategic planning. What I want to talk about right now is focusing on drivers of value. So what is it that drives value in a business and what detracts? If you're a smaller business, what I've found many times in smaller companies is that the company is way too dependent on the owner. If I asked you, could you take off for 2 weeks on vacation and not call in? And if your answer is no, well, right now I understand why it would be no. But prior to COVID-19, if your answer was no, then that means that your business is too dependent on you. And I would encourage you to do what you can to make it less dependent. And perhaps you don't have anyone on staff that you can necessarily delegate to like you would like to. But if you do, then start making a list of what you need to get off your plate and delegate and trust them and give them some time to learn what they need to learn. Trust. Okay, you can't do it all yourself. I understand being an entrepreneur, you want to take control and you want to be in control and you believe that you can do it best yourself, but you're only one person and out of 24 hours, you want to try to sleep 7 of those hours. And I understand that when you have other people on board, they have other responsibilities. You have managers in different departments and you don't want to overload them. We want to keep them happy, and I get that too. But they're also there because they want to support you, because they want to work for you, and they want to help. So let them help you. Let your advisors help you. Let your accounting firm help you. If you're not feeling confident that your accounting firm is a source for advisory, then let me know when the program is over. I have lots and lots of contacts. I have a very strong network. It's who I am. I believe my network is my net worth. And I firmly believe in referring good, solid professionals to my business owner clients. If I don't have business, right? If you don't have a business, I don't have a business, and neither do they. So it's in our best interest to help you. And if you are feeling that, the only time you ever talk to your accounting firm is to do your taxes at the end of the year, you need more than that. You need someone that is going over your P&L with you on a regular basis, at least quarterly, going through your financials, helping you understand your balance sheet, making sure that you're following your budget. And if you need to rework your budget, rework your budget. Big deal. If you need to rework your plan, that's okay. We're all learning how to be nimble right now. And I think we're getting pretty good at it. So yes, we need to continue to call on our coping skills. And that's okay, because we're getting stronger, right? I always tell my kids, especially, I have 4 kids, and they're all young adults, and they're all, working in the world. And, they've been through some things in their life, and we won't go into that. It's been a rough road for them, just, growing up in an entrepreneurial family. And I just say, you know what, we're like cats. Well, however we're thrown, we land on our feet. And if that helps you with that little picture, then that's groovy. As far as fixed expenses and variable expenses are concerned, I think that that's one place where many times business owners don't really think about how they could reduce expense. They think they have to eliminate it altogether, or they have to lay people off, because that line item expense of salary and payroll is the biggest one. But you want to be really careful if you have to lay people off, that you make sure that those folks are not key people. While we have a workforce now that's changed, right? While that is so, it's still really tough to replace your best people. And yeah, they make the most money. But boy, the ones who have all of that intellectual property on your business and understanding of your staff and your customers, your clients, your suppliers, your vendors, your systems, all of those things. Super important that you make good decisions on who to retain if you have to eliminate some of those positions. All right, next slide, please. I'm not really fond of the new normal term, to be honest, but I put it in here because it's starting to resonate with people and they get what it means. But new normal, I don't know that we're really there. I don't think that we're really there yet, but we're trying to figure it out, right? So that's what we're up to today. We're trying to figure out what is the new normal, how do I close the value gap? And when you're trying to make your decisions on where you need to shore up and improve and eliminate and add on, all of those things, all those changes that you need to make, start with these areas in your business. Operations, of course, is super important. What are some processes that we could fine tune? Where are we wasting time? We can't manufacture more time. We can make more money. We can recover monetary losses, and you will. I don't know how you will. That's, remains to be seen. Maybe not with this business, maybe with a different business. I don't know. I did it. It's possible. But I know one thing. I will never be able to manufacture the last hour that I just lost because I was doing something that someone else could do, or because I was surfing the internet for too long, or because whatever. So really be dialed in on how you're spending your time, how your key people are spending your time. When we're talking about key people and we're talking about leadership, please, please, please have regular meetings. When you're thinking about making changes, when you're doing these feasibility studies and figuring out, do we have the capacity? Do we have room, right? When you're talking about operations, you got your capacity here and you got your level right here of productivity, which means you got a gap that you can close, right? You have this much space because you have this many people and this much capacity, and you can close that without adding extra expense. So you have to figure out how big is that gap? How much room do we have before we have to buy more equipment or add on another location or hire more people, right? So think about that. That's all in your operations and in part of your feasibility study. And then, do you have the right people in place, and do you need other people? As you're figuring out through feasibility and working with your advisors what's next for you, are the people that you have, in the seats right now, are they capable? Do they have the skill set? And are they already maxed out? We want to make sure that we're keeping our people happy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But just to go through this, and remember when we talked about a SWOT analysis a few slides ago? I think it's a really good practice to just go through every single one of these and do a mini SWOT. And to refresh on a SWOT, if you're not familiar with that, it's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Right now, COVID-19 is a threat. The economy is a threat. Future taxes and how we're going to have to pay for all of these programs coming up is a threat. So that's going to change things, right? The workforce can be a threat. And so just identify what they are. It doesn't mean you can necessarily do anything about them, but sometimes you can. But you got to be aware what they are, because it adjusts how you make decisions and go forward. And then if you look at what weaknesses and opportunities, they are generally the two sides of the same coin. So if you take, for instance, if you take a weakness that your IT systems are antiquated, and you really need to have better IT systems. Well, that's an opportunity to bring in someone who specializes in IT, not only in integrating systems, but updating systems and making sure that you have security. Security is huge right now. Okay, I have that as number 6. This is not necessarily in any order, by the way. I just listed them. And you could take and subcategorize every single one of these and make more, right? Under leadership, you could make that be HR, and or I'm sorry, human capital is already there, number 7. But you could make the security and the safety be your IT part, right? Your technology can merge with number 5 and number 6. Leadership is also has to do with you. You're the business owner. And when you feel like you have people that are not performing, it may not be because they're lazy or because they don't care. It may be because they haven't had enough direction. So when you're assessing your human capital, you have to think about what you're doing for them to be a good leader, to keep them moving forward, to make sure that you acknowledge them, because your people are everything. They're your biggest asset. And people, when you look at any survey out there of employees from any company, large or small, one of the most important things to anybody who works for someone else is that they feel like they're part of a team and what they have to say matters. And so your people need to know that they're part of a team. It's part of your culture. They need to know what they have to say matters. And pay is important too. But those other two things, being a part of that, right? And yes, we're going through some tough times. And yes, it's tough because who do we have to go to? Well, you have your advisors, okay? You have your peers. Your employees need to be able to go to you. So if you haven't focused on that, focus on that, because you need them. Next slide, please. One thing I didn't mention in the last slide that I just want to touch on really quick. When you're thinking about objectives and improvements that you need to make to your different departments and how you want to grow your business and improve it, there are going to be things that come up in your brainstorming sessions, and you should have them, that are important, but they aren't necessarily things that are urgent, right? They're things that you want to maybe do in the future. Maybe open another location, or maybe add a division. Maybe not right now, but maybe in the future. So those things just go in your parking lot. And you don't want to lose the idea. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel when the time comes to set new objectives. So just put them in the parking lot. And sometimes it's because you don't have the resources. Maybe you don't have the time. Maybe you don't have the capital. But at some point you will, because it's a good idea and you don't want to lose it. So make yourself a parking lot. Okay, I'm big into metrics. And we've been talking a lot about the softer side of keeping going and making sure that we can grow this going concern and keep our head on straight and remain sane and positive. But we also have to have measurables. And there are certain things that you can measure. You don't have to measure everything, but you do have to measure some things. And I would recommend that you get yourself a dashboard if you don't already have one. There are lots of different options out there. If you're using QuickBooks, I believe QuickBooks even has a dashboard that you can adjust and use if you're not already. And you have to decide what's important for you to watch on a regular basis. And I would have to say that, you know, your cash in the bank is important for you to watch that number on a regular basis, your accounts receivable. If you have an AR, and AR is generally an area where there's money sitting out there and there hasn't been a lot of action taken. So if you're in the business where you are the bank for a while, try to shorten that term, okay? One of the best ways to close a cash gap, and a cash gap is the time between when you deliver a service or a product and the time that you get paid. How long does it take for you to actually get paid? And how long are you floating your customers, right? Want to try to close that and maybe give them a reward for paying sooner, and then see what you can do with your vendors and suppliers to maybe ask them if you have a little bit more time, right? So it's kind of both sides of that coin. Another thing too that I've found is pricing. Pricing, and we talked about that a little bit before with like packaging, products, services. But when was the last time you increased your prices? Even just a little bit. If you did a projection on an increase in pricing in certain categories, certain items, or packaging them together and then charging a larger price versus having a singular price for smaller items, put them together and then package that. Think about that. The time value of money, we talked about that before in time management. One time management strategy that I would strongly encourage that you do if you're not already is to have good, solid, regular meetings with your staff. You should be meeting every week and maybe even meeting every day. And I'm not talking about sitting in a conference room if you're going to meet every day. I'm talking about doing a stand-up or a huddle where you're meeting for 10 or 15 minutes, going over the highlights of the day, the things that people need to touch on. What that does and how that helps you manage your time is huge, because that prevents people from stopping in your office and asking you a question that could wait till tomorrow. Stopping into another manager's office or having an issue that they need to talk about. Talk about it in the morning. If it's something that's a burning issue, flaming inferno that you got to handle right now, that's fine. But if it can wait until the next day or even the next week, then table it and teach your people to be able to do that, because that will really, really help save a lot of time. And having an agenda when you're meeting and understanding what your meetings are about. If you're having a meeting on troubleshooting, then you're going to be talking about issues and you're going to be talking about how to solve for those issues. However, if you're having a strategic planning meeting, you're not going to sit there the whole time and hash out issues and try to solve for them. All you're doing is identifying. You're going to identify where you're weak, identify where you're strong, identify where your opportunities are, and then have some thought on how to go about accomplishing that. And you probably won't do it in one sitting. But just have good meetings, start on time, end on time. Make sure that your agenda is crystal clear, and make sure that everybody sitting around that table has got accountabilities. What are they going to work on between now and the next meeting? And then you report on that. And you will be amazed at how many things you can get done. All right, brand awareness is important. Marketing, we're going to talk about that in a second. Delaying a decision that you can't make today, putting it in the parking lots is okay as long as you've identified it. If you really can't do it right now, I get it. But make sure that it's a good reason and not an excuse. There's a difference between the two, okay? And then your culture is important. You know, we don't have time to talk a lot about culture right now, but you do have to figure out, okay, how can I improve my culture? It's not only good for your people, it's good for you, okay? You need to feel that and have that and give you something to look forward to in the morning and wake up to a team that cares. And if you already have that, then good for you. Next slide, please. We didn't really talk a whole lot about the new economy, but that has been thrown around a lot in circles, you know, media and business publications and things like that. I don't even know if we know what the new economy is. And so I guess I wouldn't spend a lot of time hanging on a tree limb over that. Focusing on 90 days, I think, is really important. But understanding the 5 Ds, so many of us are still living in disaster. That's one of the 5 Ds. When we talk about contingency planning, I think I said in the beginning of the presentation that we were going to get into a little bit of de-risking conversation, and that's where we're at right now. You've already lived through and are living through one of the 5 Ds. Maybe you've lived through one of the others. There's death, divorce, disagreement, disability, disaster. Disaster takes many forms. Right now we're living in a pandemic, and that's kind of a disaster, right? That can cause distress in the company financially, just, you know, not being able to move forward, being stuck. Disability, people get in accidents, people get sick. Disagreements between partners. I've had my own experience with that, and I've had clients with experiences with that. One of the biggest problems in partnerships starts with a buy-sell agreement that either doesn't exist or is not clear. And so if you don't have a buy-sell agreement or you haven't updated it in a while, I would strongly recommend that you do that right now. Divorce can really impact a business, and depending on who's involved in the business. So just be thinking about what could happen, right? And if someone dies and there's no plan in place, no contingency plan in place, you have to have those plans in place. And that's another, like I said, another whole conversation. I just want you to be aware. And I think now that business owners are more in tune with safeguarding against what could possibly happen. Honestly, there's no way that we could safeguard against everything. But if you protect yourself more now than you were before, chances are better that you're going to get through it than if you don't. And I think that we've all learned that lesson. So I'm hoping that those of you who are listening are nodding your head going, yep, wasn't ready for that, or figured out that I wasn't ready for X, Y, or Z. And so that's where you start. That's where you start. On the flip side of that, though, I have a client. I have a lot of clients, but I have one who, and this is a positive thing. So if you're thinking about selling, and you're hearing that, oh, it's not a good M&A market, oh, there's no buyers out there, that is not true. One of my clients in 24 or 48 hours received 24 non-disclosure agreements signed. They were interested in buying her business. 10 of those became letters of intent. And so now she's in the process of vetting, going through with her investment banker, all the letters of intent to decide who to pick, which one is the best option. And so, yes, there are buyers out there. And yes, it's a different world. If you feel like you're in a position where you want to start, you're making a decision, do I stay or do I go? I'm going to share with you later on a resource that will probably help you go through and make that decision of whether you should stay or whether you should sell. But as far as the de-risking goes, I'm going to give you one more story. And this is one that occurred with a client of mine 2 or 3 years ago. And I bring it up because it's an area that a lot of business owners overlook, and that's insurance. We don't even really a lot of times pay attention to our insurance coverages until we need them. And so when we talk about de-risking, that's one area that you got to focus on and de-risk. And this particular client was buying out a partner and had bought out a previous partner 5 years prior. And when we started working together, I said, you should really visit with your insurance agent. I just like to make sure that you have enough coverage and the right coverages, and that you have enough key person insurance, things like that. And so he did, and found out that his key person policy was still naming his former partner as beneficiary. It was a multi-million-dollar policy, by the way, that he bought out 5 years prior. So thank goodness we had that updated. That's just one example. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit more on contingency planning because it's so important. I'm not going to go through every single one of these bullets. I just want you to know that these are all the areas that you need to focus on to take care of your going concern and your family. We're going to talk a little bit about the personal side of things too. But what is it that you need to protect? Do you have any intellectual property that you could protect? Even if you just trademarked the name of your company or your logo so that no one else can use it, especially if you're doing business in other places besides Minnesota, you should totally protect that. Maybe you have a process that you've got a trade secret that you could protect. There's a lot of value there, and what it does is it shores up value. It brings value into your business. Your people are your value. Your brand is your value. Your customer list, client list is your value. Most of the value that's in your business is intangible, not tangible. The lenders lend on the tangible, right? They lend on the equipment, the inventory, the real estate, and that's what they like. But the value of the business really is in your people, your processes, your customer list, your reputation, your brand message, making sure that your brand is tight and consistent. And so these are some places that you can think about when you're going through your planning session. And one thing I wanted to talk about too when we're talking about de-risking and having good relationships with advisors is with a banker. Boy, you got to have a good relationship with a banker, maybe even more than one. I recommend more than one, and having a good relationship with them before you need them. So, having a relationship with a bank, not necessarily the larger ones, but ones large enough that actually do SBA financing. Highland Bank, Choice Bank, 21st Century Bank, Mid-Country Bank. There are several of them, mid-sized banks that are based on and foster good relationships with privately held companies. And of course, here we are, doing a webinar for the SBA, and who better to talk to than them about the programs that they have that are available. And just knowing, right, being aware and knowing what's available, and knowing who to go to, right, having those banking relationships so that when you need them, you already have that figured out, instead of having to scramble to make a relationship, and then at that point you're behind the 8 ball. Fostering a relationship with an attorney before you need one, before you need the investment banker or the broker, before you need valuation experts. So those kinds of relationships are huge. All right, next slide, please. So going into a little bit more too about how to foster value, build value in your business, and what impacts the transferability. Of course, it's owner dependency, and we talked about that already. Customer concentration. Try not to have any more than 20% of your business come from any one customer or client, because that way it won't make an impact if they die or go away or go out of business. And I think that some of us are experiencing that. I know I am. I lost my 2 biggest clients when COVID hit, and I've since replaced them. But boy, that was kind of scary for me financially. And boy, I really felt sorry for them too. So what are the things that drive value? What are the things that take away value? And here on this particular slide, focus on these, because they definitely will drive value in your business. We talked a lot about this already. I just don't want you to forget. It's so important. Next slide, please. As business owners, we need to be personally prepared. And this is another checklist for you to personally prepare yourself. Yes, there's some repetition here. But when we were talking about preparedness before, we were talking about business preparedness. Remember when we first started the seminar, and I said when you're talking about transition planning, you have to plan well in advance, at least 10 years, if you can, okay? And that there's 2 different distinctions. There's owner readiness or preparedness, and then there's business readiness or preparedness. So don't forget about you. You've sacrificed. You have lost sleep. You have not paid yourself. You have lost sleep because you didn't know how you were going to keep up with the growth, or how you were going to make payroll, and everything in between. I know, I've lived it, okay? And so you got to think about yourself, think about your life, your future. Make sure that you have a good relationship with a financial advisor. You got to have a good financial planner. They're huge. You do, and then that's not the company that manages your 401k, generally speaking. I'm talking about a relationship with someone who can help you with a plan. And so many business owners say to me, Julie, I don't really need a relationship with a financial planner right now because my nest egg is my business. I get that. I get that. That's why you need a planner. Because if you have all your eggs in that one basket, you're taking on a lot of risk. And so you need to have someone think about and help you plan for the future and how to de-risk yourself financially with some ideas and some planning. And how do you maintain your lifestyle? Are the capital markets the answer? Do you take on a partial liquidity event? Do you pull some equity out of your business now and diversify? So I think diversification now more than ever is probably a key. And if you can't, I get that too, but you still got to have the relationship. So again, if you need introductions, if you need to meet some people in that space who specialize in working with small business, not everybody does. Very important to understand that. You might already have a relationship with someone, but if they haven't worked and don't work with small businesses, then it's important for you to get an opinion from a good advisor who knows and understands small business. All right, next slide, please. All right, we've come to close to the end of our presentation today, and I wanted to just list a few resources for you. I could have listed pages of resources. One of the resources, of course, that's not on here that you definitely have access to all the time, every day, and that's all of the resources that SBA would advise you to take advantage of, and I would too. You know, you got SCORE. You can go to the SBA website, and there's pages and pages of resources there for you. And so please take advantage of that. Please take advantage of that. I think that a lot of business owners forget, right? We forget that that's out there, and that's what we're paying for as taxpayers. So use it. All right. Pepperdine University does a private capital markets report every year. And so the link is here. I think you already got the slide, so you can just click on that link and pay attention to the report starting on page 99. I mean, the whole report is really good. You know, it talks about, different ways that companies are capitalizing their businesses, private equity and venture capital and things like that, and the stats across the country. But it's fun for you to be able to see what your peers are doing. And so it talks about business owner statistics on page 99 or starting on page 99. And then Vern Harnish, he's a business growth guru. Align with him, get his free newsletters, listen to his YouTube videos and interviews. There's just so much meat there and so much help, and you don't even have to pay for it. Simon Sinek is another really great thought leader. I think that he's got some amazing ideas on how to build a really strong team. And if there's one thing that we need right now is a team around us to keep us strong and keep us going. And use your team for ideas. Everybody's got different perspective. Everybody's got different ideas. We all come from a different place, and none of us have all the answers. Not one person can have all the answers. But boy, I'll tell you what, collectively, I think we get pretty close. So use your team, use your advisors. And then for some things that I have to offer you, I've got my company Key Strategies, keystrategies.com. Then I also have Poised for Exit. And there's a book that I wrote called Poised for Exit, and I also produce a podcast show. And so if you go to poisedforexit.com, you'll be able to take a look at what's in the book. There's a lot of checklists in there, lots of tools in the back of the book. And then the podcast show actually has a lot of content too. And I meant to put that show together for you, for business owners. It's less than a half an hour. And there's one episode in there called Go or Grow that if you're thinking about whether you should sell or not, that probably would be a good episode for you to listen to. And that's all I have for today. So I would love to know if you have any questions or comments, and I'll see what you got.
Thanks, Julie. So at this time, we will open it up for questions. Julie, while we sort of take a look at people's questions coming in, do you mind going over the handouts that were emailed out and what those resources are?
Sure. So the transition planning checklist, I briefly referred to that, I think, in the beginning of the presentation. I put that together for the clients that I start working with because I use it as a tool for us to start a conversation. It helps us to determine where they're strong and where they might need some help. And so whether you're in the throes of planning to sell or not, it really doesn't matter. The conversation around what's on that worksheet will just kind of help you move forward with where to start. And if there's one thing that I know business owners ask all the time is, I don't know where to start. Where do I start? So I would start with that. And then there was an article that was written by a colleague of mine from Ballard Spahr, which is a law firm here in the Twin Cities. They've got several law firm locations across the country. But I have a couple of colleagues that I work with through Ballard Spahr that I respect and know well. And one in particular that wrote that article that I just thought was so spot on. So I think it's called Boomer Resilience or OK Boomer. And it's just really, if you're a baby boomer, you've lived through a lot, right? You lived through Black Monday, you lived through 9/11, you lived through the recession of 2009, and everything in between. And now you're living through another. And so anyway, I think that it just kind of helps put things into perspective. And then I think that there was a strategy worksheet. Did you guys send that out too or no?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Okay, so the strategy worksheet is just for you to kind of organize your thoughts. It's not really in replacement of a strategic planning worksheet, but boy, you could start with it and just kind of list out what your main objectives are, who's responsible, what kind of deadline you'd like to put on accomplishing that goal. And it kind of just helps everybody stay organized. And so you could use that as a tool in your team meetings even, right? Just to kind of keep your thought process in the right direction.
Great. So thank you so much. We'll take a look now at the questions. It looks like we have one in the chat box. Are there any resources you recommend for nonprofit businesses that are transitioning or rebuilding into a new nonprofit business?
Mm-hmm. I'm not a specialist when it comes to nonprofits, but I will tell you that a nonprofit is still a business, and to treat it as such, to run it like a business. Any tool that's out there for any particularly profitable business or for-profit business would still be helpful for a nonprofit business. And if you're thinking about transitioning, then I would make sure that you have a good relationship with a commercial lender who specializes in nonprofits, and they're out there. So if you need references on lenders that might be specialists with that, I can certainly help you. And so just ping me after, and I can make some connections for you there.
Okay. And we have someone, could you go over SWOT one more time?
Yeah,
SWAT for review.
Sure. Absolutely. So a SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when you're doing a planning session, you probably would just start with a SWOT. Start with identifying your values. We talked about values for a while, and then your SWOT, and do an overarching for the whole company first. And before you start dissecting and going through departments, just do one SWOT for the whole company. And then another way you could do that, instead of doing it initially as a team, you could each do one individually. Say, for instance, there's a couple of you that are business partners, and then you've got an operations manager, and you got a sales manager, maybe you got a shop manager or a general manager. Each of those leaders in your company should do a SWOT on the company. And then for each of those categories, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, 5. Oh, no more than 5. Just list your top 5. You know, they could list 30 if they want to, right? But you gotta dial it down. You can't focus on 30 things. No more than 5. And then after everybody's done their SWOT, then you can get together and compare. And your eyes will be opened. You'll be like, oh, well, that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought of that. And you'll gain agreement, and you'll come up with new ideas. And then there's going to be overlap, where many people will have identified the same weakness or the same strength. And then you know you really got something there. So that can be a really fun way for you to move forward into planning, because your goals will come out of a really solid SWOT analysis.
Yeah. And I would say also just a simple search in Google, you can pull up a nice SWOT template, and that can definitely guide you if you print it out and want to do it as a team. So that's a great resource.
Yeah, for sure. Good point, Katie. I think that Vern Harnish, that resources page that I showed you guys, I believe he's got a lot of templates that are free on there too. And so you could Google and see what's out there and see what you like, right? If you look at something and you go, oh my gosh, this is so complicated, don't go there. We don't want complicated. We want simple, easy to understand, easy to use, something that you can share, you know, with your team, Google Docs or Dropbox or whatever. Yeah.
And I just want to say from the SBA side, we talked a lot about advisors today, and SBA has some really great no-cost resources through our resource partners, particularly for small businesses. So if you're not aware of so SCORE is our mentorship program. So you can connect with a business mentor for free to support on any sort of issue that you would like to look at, whether that's re-envisioning your business plan, if that's around marketing or transitioning. They can connect you with a mentor that way. And those are volunteer mentors who are experienced in different fields, and they really try to match you with your business. And that's nationwide as well. So if you're calling in from outside of Minnesota, there are SCORE chapters around the country. Another great resource is the Small Business Development Centers.
Yeah.
They house paid consultants, but it's no cost to you. They also do feasibility studies, which Julie Keys had talked about. So if you're looking into those projections, and especially in this time, to get connected with a consultant that way. So if you need to get connected with our small business development centers or other resources, you can reach out to us. On the slide here, this last slide, we have our main contact to the Minnesota District Office. And even if you're calling in or joining us from out of state, if you message us, we can connect you with your local SBA office. So, and that goes for our newsletters as well. We try to make sure that we get in there local resources. For example, if you type in a Minnesota zip code, we put in things from the state of Minnesota and local government as well, to make sure that you have the most updated resources coming from us. And it's really great to hear about the extended resources that Julie is bringing in, because we're really focused on the government side. But the private sector is providing so much knowledge as well, and really that inspirational leadership and guidance on that as well. So we do have a question. How do I retain or hire the right fit advisor? So whether I go with like an SBA advisor or someone in the private sector, how do I find that best fit or retain them?
That's a really good question. And I think that for the person who coined that question, when they said right fit, I think that that's everything. So we definitely want to work with someone who's competent. We want to work with someone who, especially if we need a specialist, okay? But if we're just looking for like that first ring of advisors, first ring is your a good business attorney, a good CPA firm, and a good financial advisor. Those are the top 3 advisors for business owners. Someone like me is helpful too. Not everybody is, geared up to work with a business consultant like me, but I can help coordinate all of that. But if you don't have someone like me, you at least need to have good relationships with those top 3. And I like to interview. Okay, so think about what's important to you. What are the needs that you have? What are the questions that you have? And what's their reputation? A downtown firm is probably going to cost more than a firm that's smaller or mid-size, but they're also going to be able to cover a lot of bases. So it really depends on what your needs are. Another way that you can vet someone is to see what kind of reviews they have. Check out their website, check out their blog posts, see if they've got any videos so that you can see if the personality is a fit, because that's important too. Fit in terms of industry specialty. Maybe they have a specialty that is good for you. Like say, for instance, if you're looking for a lawyer, you probably would, if you're in the construction industry, it would be good for you to work with someone who specializes in new construction. That's just a specialty animal and I've spent a lot of time in that area myself, both as a consultant and as a business owner. And so working with people that really know what they're doing is huge. And then asking for references, referrals from people that you know, that you like, and that you trust. To Katie's point, getting in touch with SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, that's a great place for you to be able to get good references, good referrals, if you don't have, that position filled. But peers, for sure, your peers are going to have good references. I worked with this person and they did a fantastic job. And then talk to 2 or 3 people and see who you think is the best before you choose. That's what I would do.
And just a note on legal services as well. Here in Minnesota, and I believe they stretch into Wisconsin, maybe North Dakota, Legal Corps they do pro bono services specifically for small businesses. Mm-hmm. And so that's a great place to start if you are currently not working with a business lawyer, but you have a few questions or you're looking to get connected to someone to work with long-term. But that's pro bono, so it is no cost to you as well. It's not a direct research partner with SBA, but we work closely with them. And they do clinics at local libraries, and I'm sure right now many virtual programs. So that's a great resource to keep in mind as well.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have another question from Carlos. I have a service business. It's a commercial janitorial service. What processes or tools do you recommend to figure out when to start hiring others to delegate? I do have an operations manager running day-to-day service delivery. So he's really thinking about delegating work from his point of view as the owner.
Okay, so we're talking about leadership delegation, or are we talking about day-to-day technical side of the business? I'm assuming that it's leadership. Okay. Well, I think that it really starts with what you need to have done, and say, for instance, you're going to take things off your plate as the leader of the company, as the owner of the company. What is it that you want to delegate? Determine what it is that you want to delegate, responsibilities, duties, things like that. And if that doesn't fall into the job description of your operations manager, but it falls into the description of someone who would be in a higher position, you've probably gotten pretty close to writing a job description then for that person. And then at that point, you really need to talk to your accounting firm and do some projections and figure out if you can afford to hire that person. Needing someone is one thing, and identifying what you need is another, because you got to do that. Then you also have to figure out how you can afford them and what their role will be besides making day-to-day decisions and running the business. Are they going to help with business development? I think that right now it's kind of an all hands on deck with that. I see sales as being everybody's responsibility, regardless if their title is sales or not. I think there was one theme that I had a client run a couple of years. It was more than a couple of years ago, but we literally had like a thermometer and like a poster. And the theme for the year was, how can I affect sales today? How can I positively affect sales today? And that was from the person who answered the phone to the person who was in the fulfillment center to the person who was delivering the products to the customer. And everybody can affect it, even if they're not like technically a salesperson. So if that leader person can help you with that overarching business development and strategic thinking, then that would be a good thing.
Wonderful. So it does look like we are just over time. So I think we're going to wrap it up. We also had one comment. If you're part of a Chamber of Commerce, can be a really good resource. So thank you, Britt, for adding that as well, along with the SBDCs and SCORE in your local geographic area, or sometimes it's based on industry. So thank you so much. I just want to say again, our contact information for the Minnesota District Office is here on this last slide, and you received an email from us with the content. If you didn't receive an email, sometimes we do get bounce backs from the Eventbrite email. So I will put the email in the chat box, and please send us an email if you were not able to receive the slide deck. And we can send out the slide deck and those resources that Julie has provided. Just a note, we also, starting next Wednesday, our next sort of external expert, and we're bringing together a panel on combining and finding capital resources. So if you're interested in thinking about unique ways, not only government resources, but other ways to find capital for your business, in whether that's in transition or starting a business, please join us next week for that. And I just want to give a great thanks for Julie for bringing all of her really practical and honest advice to our presentation today, and for our small businesses who have joined us. That's so valuable. And I think especially in this time, this is so important to all of us. So thank you again. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great 4th of July. Bye now.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.